Have you ever played that recall game where you run and hide from your dog? Well, today we're taking it to the next level. What if I tried it in the woods with all those scents and distractions around? More specifically, what if I had a 45-minute head start and I ran an entire kilometre into the woods? Darwin hasn't appeared on this page very much, despite the business being named after him. This is due to the fact that at the beginning of the year he tore a ligament in his knee, and now after almost a year of recovery and physiotherapy, he's finally allowed to get back to what he loves doing the most: mantrailing. Mantrailing is a technique that's used in search and rescue, but it's also a very popular dog sport for pet dogs. He's trained to sniff a scent article. This is something that someone has either worn or touched in a bag. He then knows that this is the odour that he has to follow, and that's the person who's missing. Although today I'm going to give him a slightly different scent article. All he's got to go on is me briefly touching his door handle. And now it's time to lay the trail. Astrid's coming along with me, hopefully to confuse the trail a little bit. Every time we come across a junction, when she goes one way I purposefully go the other way. This means that he really needs to think about staying on task and not get distracted by following his best friend's trail. In mantrailing, the dog is meant to be following human odour. We disperse this at a rate of 40,000 particles a minute. It can then be caught in the wind and blown away, gathering on nearby surfaces like trees or bushes or other vegetation. This means that he's not specifically following an actual track, but rather wherever the weather blows the scent. But he is a smart boy, and he will resort to tracking if the weather and the ground conditions are right. And now let's see how Darwin's doing. He's getting dressed in his working harness. He only ever uses this for mantrailing. The second it goes on, he switches into working mode. It's very similar to how guide dogs work. Once their harness goes on, they know it's time to do a job. And now he's dressed, it's time to get to work. Becky starts off by asking him to sniff the door handle. And that's all he needs. His target scent is now locked in. And now all he needs to do is establish what direction I went in. He briefly sniffs towards the front of the car and almost immediately knows that I've gone the other way. Scent clings to moisture, so his nose goes down and he tracks as he goes through the wet mud. As soon as he transitions onto this hard surface, there's less scent available, and so his nose is up and he's trying to catch the odour on the wind. Instead of moving in a relatively straight line as he does with tracking, he plays hot and cold with the scent, often looking like zigzagging. And now he's very confident what direction the trail takes. On a side note, some people don't let their dogs go to the toilet whilst they're trailing, but we do. Quite often, he'll stop to pee at complicated junctions. He uses it as a method so that he can stop and think, and he knows we're going to leave him alone if he's trying to go to the toilet. And here he arrives at the first hurdle. At this junction, I turned left and Astrid went right. So he slows down to thoroughly investigate it. And he was not tricked. Coming up, he stops to relieve himself, so I'm going to cut that bit out. Okay, straight back to work. He's now approaching the second junction. This is where I turned right and Astrid turned left. He's been trained to follow which direction the trail goes in. He's also been trained to identify which direction the trail does not go in. Here he immediately shows interest in going towards the right, but we also want to know what he thinks about left. You can read it in his body language when he's figured out what direction to go, and see a clear level of disinterest in pursuing any other direction. Here he disengages from going left. He immediately runs back to where he last had the trail. He re-establishes its direction, and then decides to go right. Back to Astrid and I. We're continuing on from where we just left Darwin. I'm going to wang it forward a bit until we get to our next junction. At this junction, we both go right. I decide to walk down it a little bit with Astrid. before turning around, backtracking on myself, and turning left instead.
This way?
Darwin's got to keep a level head when he comes to find us. He could quite easily continue on that right-hand turn and lose the trail. Following on in this direction, we come across a fallen tree. That's going to be fun for them to climb over. Something interesting happens here. We leave the forest and enter an open space. The wind is blowing in that direction and it's going to carry my scent forward, with a lot less stuff for it to stick to. So we decide to hang out here for a little while and allow the wind to disperse my scent all over the field in front of me. Back to Darwin, and he's coming up against his first distraction. Oncoming is an off-lead dog, albeit a very under-control off-lead dog. He completely ignores it, but he does have a sniff at the humans as he passes. He's making sure that that's not the person he's looking for, and then immediately accelerates forward. And now to wang it forward to the next junction. And here he goes, tracking with his nose down in the wet grass and mud, although he only makes it as far as I go, and not as far as Astrid went. He figures out that I actually turned left, and decides to commit to that direction. The fallen tree was definitely not the obstacle I thought it was going to be. And now he's approaching the junction where I decided to stop and wait. The longer I waited there, the more my scent dispersed, and that can make it more complicated for him to figure out what direction to go in. First he tries left, and he quickly decides this is not the right way. He then tries forward. This is the direction that the wind was carrying my scent in. He shows a little bit more interest going this way. He then tries right. He's also interested in this direction. This means both forward and right need to be investigated. And so they start by going forward. He investigates this by tracking. My scent would have been caught on the wind, pushed forward, and then dropped onto the grass and the mud. This is the only available place where he will find any of my odour. At this point he starts to really slow down. It's quite clear that he's no longer interested or excited to continue pursuing this direction. And so they both stop to let him decide where to go next. After a moment of thinking, he decides, let's go back to where we last most definitely had the trail. And that's back to the previous junction. And now we're back. He immediately decides to check out that first left again, and he's not interested in it at all. He then tries the right. And it's very clear that this is the direction that he wants to go in. Once again, he saw past my trick. Back to Astrid and I. We continue on until we come across another crossroad. I decide that we're going to go left. And now it's Darwin's turn to work that junction. He checks out left. He checks out forward. Then he stops to have a thinking wee. Investigates towards the right. Decides that's not the way we went. And then immediately he runs back to the left with very positive trailing behaviour. He's very committed to this direction. We're coming up to 1 kilometer now and I'm looking for a place to hide. I'm thinking about going into the trees on my right. But not happy with how dense the bushes are, I decide to walk on a little bit further. And here comes Darwin, hot on our heels. He comes across another junction here. He swings right, quickly decides that's not the way we went, and then continues on with his original direction. Back to Astrid and I, we decide it's now time to off-road it. This is when we enter another clearing, and it works as another crossroad, with 4 possible directions to go in. I decide to be a little mean and walk around in a circle, covering all 4 of the exits. And then instead of taking an obvious exit, I cut into the forest. And here I found a nice big tree that I want to hide behind. This is our final hiding spot, and we've been waiting here since before Darwin even got out of the car. Back to Darwin, who's hot on our trail. It turns out suddenly off-roading it didn't confuse him at all. If anything, it actually seemed a little easier for him, as there's a lot of wet long grass, which my scent clung to. And now he's in the clearing that I did the circle in. He works it like any other junction, checking out every possible exit. The issue is, I'm right around the corner, and the entire time that I've been here, my scent has been dispersing into the area. He knows he's really close, hence the sudden increase in his speed and excitement. This is the moment he's really got to keep a level head. The longer that I've been waiting here, the harder it is for him, as my scent is spread everywhere. After initially going the wrong way, he decides this isn't the correct direction and decides to head back to where he had the scent. This time, he heads straight into the woods. This is definitely not easy land to trail on. There are trees everywhere and sticks all over the floor to get tangled in the line, plus loads of small branches at eye height. You can see he's accelerated significantly and there's very strong tension on the line. He knows he's close. And just over this ridge, he's seen me. And he completely ignores Astrid. He knows I'm the one he was looking for. He's meant to sit when he finds me. But it has been a year since he's done this, and bless him, he's really excited. As soon as his bum hits the ground, I feed him his favourite treat. And we throw a little party. This is a bird's eye view of our trail from start to finish. I'm in blue and he's in red. You can see on each junction that he didn't only find the right direction, but also identified the wrong routes. This is the part where I tried to trick him, where I waited with the wind behind me blowing my scent into the field. And that was Darwin's first mantrail in a year.